He, that being my dungeon master, tried to cover my character and... We're early in the video. Can I say that?
Yeah, I probably shouldn't risk it.
Let's just go with bodily fluid no less than 3 times over the course of a couple of sessions. The first time we entered the city, he had the party roll. The lowest roll had a bucket of urine dumped on them from the window above. It wasn't me, but he stated loudly that he wished it would have been. He tried that again with me as the sole target, but different to the first time. I got a saving throw and dodged it. Lastly, after he murdered my character in all possible ways except for touching their hit points, I wanted my character to just drink away their sorrows for the remainder of the day. There, he offered some sort of tweaked poison. The ranger recognized it, and instead of preventing me from drinking it and insisting on normal alcohol, he drank it himself, fell unconscious instantly, and soiled himself. After that, the Dungeon Master also decided what my character did that night, overruled all of my objections, and had them wake up in a pig stall. So I guess the DM got what he wanted in the end. Somehow. In the same session, as a last occurrence, he had the Aarakocra player make a saving throw for a landing, only to rule they stumble and fall into a puddle of piss. I could say it at that last bit because we're 1 minute into the video. Ha! There is a D&D comic that made the rounds a while ago of a DM doing this, and it's framed there as a joke, like an over-exaggerated thing that would never ever happen, but I guess some Dungeon Masters would look at that comic and think that it's aspirational. Ugh. Let's just perish the thought. So this is a light-hearted horror story of one of my players outsmarting me, the Dungeon Master, and kind of short-circuiting the entire session I planned. Let me know if y'all decide if it doesn't fit here. Also obligatory, sorry if the formatting is off, mobile. It was Dungeons & Dragons 3.5, mostly rules as written with a few simplifications to the system. The only character who's really important to the story is the Sorcerer, but note that everyone here are friends in real life. I was running a fun, epic hero campaign for them, and saw them trying to save my store-brand ripoff of Faerun with the evil super dragon who is trying to reassemble the shards of the super-powerful ancient MacGuffin, because he's evil or something. Say it with me, y'all. The ancient bad guy needs 4 different crystals representing the 4 elements of the world, and the only person who can stop him is a random farm boy in the middle of nowhere who's somehow tied to him in his evil backstory. Oh, and a dad probably dies, and throw a hot girl in there too. The fundamentals of every fantasy story. Yeah, sue me, I know it's generic as hell, but we have fun with that kind of thing. So, they're hopping from plane to plane in search of the shards, and I think by this point they were level 12 to 14, somewhere in that range. They were traveling to the astral plane and were sailing through it on an astral ship the session before. Between sessions, I had read about the Gith factions being really prevalent in the astral plane, and I was like, oh man, wouldn't it be so awesome if my players got to have some epic ship-to-ship fight with one of them? So I spent the whole week meticulously planning out this whole encounter. I basically turned the enemy ship into a whole dungeon that they'd have to clear and stocked it up with some sweet loot as a reward. I was super excited as running these kind of neat combat encounters is something I've gotten a lot of positive responses from, and I'm always on the lookout for new and interesting ways to spice up combat. My players tend to like them as well and find really creative ways to use their environment. But despite all that, we'd somehow never really done a ship battle, and I was really interested to see how they'd respond and what they'd come up with. Cue the next session. Everyone sits down, and I run the session, giving them about 20-30-ish minutes of game time to do whatever they want to do and just generally get settled into the game. Then, I have them roll a spot check. Everyone fails it, but the Sorcerer, who happened to roll a natural 20. We did crit success / fails on skill checks, so your character could succeed on anything they could reasonably do. So I tell them that he sees a ship a few hundred feet away, loaded up with Githyanki, and headed straight for you. Dun dun dun. I'm super excited at this point. Now he tells the rest of the party, and they all do quick skill checks to see what they know about Githyanki, and I give them a quick general rundown of their lore. As the party is discussing what to do, the Sorcerer seems to latch onto the part about how they hate the Zerai? All I know about Githyanki comes from Mr. Rex and Baldur's Gate 3, man. Come on. Now, quick note about Sorcerer. This player delighted in playing what he called the Swiss Army Mage, basically a support mage, and tried to solve all problems without using the standard kind of DPS spells like Fireball. He was, and still is to this day, one of my favorite players, as he's super effective in combat despite this tendency. So anyway, he asked how long before the ship closes in, and I tell him that they have minutes, like 10 to 15 minutes tops. He gives me a big smile and starts digging through his sheets while the rest of the party debate on how to handle this upcoming battle. After a couple minutes, he's like, guys, I got this. And he tells me he was gonna
do the thing.
Trademark. This was actually a courtesy rule we'd established, basically telling the table that someone was going to monopolize the spotlight for a minute and giving people the opportunity to object. He turns to me and said, I want to cast Polymorph Self, Githyanki, Greater Invisibility, Tongues, Spider Climb, and Fly, all on myself. Now I'm thinking, oh man, he's gonna fly over to the other ship and wait until combat starts and like mess with them from within their own ranks. This is gonna be awesome. So I double check that he can do all that, standard practice when someone is
do the thing,
trademark, and nod to him to continue. He then narrates his sorcerer flying across to the other ship and climbing up the side. To this day, I don't know why he didn't just fly up to the deck, but he was adamant he needed to climb up. He then says he wants to cast Major Illusion, I think, and I ask, what kind of illusion do you want to make? He responds with, I want to make an illusion of a Githzerai ship far off in the distance, and then dispel my invisibility and shout to the Githyanki crew that we must destroy our ancient enemies. The whole table is silent for a solid 10 seconds before all the players just explode in laughter. I'm thinking furiously of any way to salvage this before I sigh and admit that I've got nothing. I make the sorcerer roll a bluff check, but he was the party face. Even with the relatively high DC I set for it, he beat it. Easily. He cast invisibility on himself again and flew back to the party ship. I narrated the Githyanki sailing off to destroy their imagined foes. My sorcerer looks supremely smug. At this point, I throw out my hands and congratulate the party and confess that the session is over. I've got nothing else. This is supposed to be like a 5-hour thing. The sorcerer is hailed as a hero for besting this overgod. I know some people may look at this as a problem player story, but I promise you, this was the kind of thing my playgroup lived for. We all tend towards and value really clever solutions to problems, and my sorcerer had really guided his questions tonight, locking me into a situation where the only way I could say no would be just DM Fiat, which I am willing to do, but in this situation, the party seemed happy to have outsmarted me and won a bloodless victory. We ended up playing Mario Kart and having drinks, and the story is still a legend to this day. Thank you for reading, friends. Hope you got a good chuckle out of it. I really love this story. I've talked before about the social contract between DMs and players. The players need to be willing to play the game. For example, if you're playing Curse of Strahd, the players can't outsmart the DM by refusing to go to Barovia. By doing that, they're just not playing the game. But here, we have a situation where I think it is justified. I think that this was an earned victory, and hey, it's not like that time is wasted. The DM can always move the materials from that dungeon into another space. It can be really scary as a dungeon master when things go way off the rails. I get it. But this DM handled it very well. Instead of trying to force the session to work or using DM Fiat, they just called it. And you know what? Sometimes that's the best option. Instead of having a possibly disastrous session trying to improv everything, you just play Mario Kart instead. There's nothing wrong with hanging out in some other way. Recently, this happened in my own game. My players completely predicted a threat that I didn't think they would know about until the end of the session. I felt like Kang at the end of Loki Season 1. We've crossed the threshold. I have no idea what's going to happen now. And you know what? That was exciting. I was excited. I didn't end the session there. I kept on going, and it ended up being one of my favorites. And my players were more engaged than I've seen them in a long time. Sometimes that kind of thing is worth it. In this campaign, I was playing a Bard rogue with a pirate background, who I would just call Bard for convenience. Bard was a musician from a small village who was kidnapped by pirates, but was well liked enough by the crew that he was made one of them, and ended up in a committed, though abusive, relationship with the captain. The pirate's base was raided by the military of a nearby nation, and Bard let himself be captured, so the rest could get away. He served his prison sentence, and when he was let out, he wandered aimlessly and joined a group of adventurers. Backstory's done, he's in the campaign now. As we played through the campaign, I had the idea to flesh out Bard's backstory more. I'd only given the Dungeon Master the bare minimum, so I did a more thorough write-up including a description of each of the members of the pirate crew. I loved the strange gang of oddballs I had come up with and looked forward to them coming up in the campaign, since the Dungeon Master was really good at incorporating backstory stuff so far. But then, tragedy struck from outside the game. My schedule at work got changed, and I could no longer play. In-game, we had just completed a personalized quest for the fighter in which she confronted her past and redeemed herself for her past failings. So I decided Bard would be inspired by this and leave for a while to go find his former crew and get closure from that chapter of his past. Then I left the game, but with the assurance I could always rejoin later if my schedule allowed. And a few months later, that is exactly what happened. My schedule changed again and I joined back with the group. I asked everyone to tell me what happened while I was gone. The party got their own ship and followed a treasure map to an island, which is awesome. As they approached the island though, they saw another ship racing them to it. And I recognized the name of the ship. It was the ship from the Bard's backstory. So what happened? Did the party have a sea battle with Bard's old group? Did they meet up on the island and race to the treasure? No. Bard's old ship crashed on some rocks near the island to establish the waters were dangerous. The ship sank, and the party found no survivors. I even talked to the dungeon masters to see if maybe they somehow survived and would come up later, and they told me to my face that everybody died. They all died, even the captain. Hey man, I just sent over another one of those NPCs, Tamerlane, an apprentice witch. I think she can act as like a friend character for my player character. It could be really cool for the campaign, and I sent over some roleplay details, so when you play her, you... Seriously? What? Calm down. All I did was kill an NPC you spent hours workshopping. It's not that big of a deal. Characters die all the time. Okay, look, I'm okay with her dying, but this seems a little unceremonious. Look, I learned from the best of the best in storytelling. If Game of Thrones Season 8 taught me anything, it doesn't matter why a character is dying or how impactful it is. All that matters is they die. You got any bullets left in that gun? Because I think I want one too. All that, just great. I still rejoined. I played a new character since Bard's backstory has been neutered, but I never really recovered from the shock and disappointment of that incident, and ended up leaving the campaign permanently a few sessions later. TLDR, my character leaves the party temporarily to go look for a group from his backstory. The DM kills that group for no discernible reason. We've talked before about how backstories can sometimes get out of hand, but I never want the message of those videos to be, don't put effort into your backstories, because that is a horrible message. I love when players put this kind of effort into their backstories, when they go in depth about characters, but the DM ensured that all that work would be for nothing. I wonder if it has something to do with the DM just not caring. The DM didn't create these characters, so why should they have a meaningful story? They were just made by a player. Who cares? But that is a terrible mentality to have. Sometimes us DMs can be really focused on our own stories, the things that we create for this game, but we also need to think about and care about the things our players make for this game. They're investing their time into our world. We should invest our time into the things they create as a part of that. And hey, if you think it doesn't fit, communicate that. But if you just keep it to yourself and just clearly don't care about the things people create for your game, I promise they can tell. They can tell very easily. So for context, like 5 years ago, Ginny D made a video about some extremely creepy Redditor, which we've never seen those before, but point is, some dude decided to give his very unique take on what she had to say, and it was, well, it was something. So here we go. This is a very good, informative video, and it helped me as a man to better understand the perspective of women. It didn't sound preachy or overly feminist like some other similar videos. It just sounded like sound advice based upon unnerving and informative stories. I do not yet make videos, but I have thought about it, so I will check out your linked pages. Thank you. While I am male, like you said, if one crosses the wrong weirdo, it doesn't matter if you're famous or what sex you are. I'm sorry to hear this happen to you and hope it never happens again. Although if Critical Role boosts your popularity more with your jester and other Crit Role character stuff, that's how I found this video, then this is likely to happen again, so it's probably good that you've taken precautions. Also, I was very disappointed to hear I got beat to the dating/fiancé step. Oh well, happy for you two. But now, I'll have to look for another woman to date who has the ability to literally, rather than figuratively, breathe life into fictional characters. That is going to be hard, though, with the current dating environment. One of the reasons I hate dating and never try it. What's the other reason, man?
Check, please. Well, you're leaving. You don't want to hear about how I hate how much woke is in video games? No. Well, can you cover my half? No!
Men like that bad guy you encountered on Reddit give the rest of us normal, mostly good men a bad reputation by relation. Because of men like that, you could take a comment like what I made above as sweet or as creepy depending on which vibe you get from me. And that's just sad. Humans should be able to trust other humans and express love, kindness, etc. towards them. But no, some people have just got to ruin it. I'm glad to hear you didn't let this get you totally down in the end and did something instead of letting it paralyze you. Good for you. I talk to women like I talk to stray dogs. Honestly though, I love how the only reason this guy thinks he doesn't have a shot with Ginny D is because she has a fiancé. Like, be for real right now, man. If the fiancé/husband, congratulations by the way, if he didn't exist, what exactly is the plan?
She may have taken 2 seconds out of her day to hit the block button on my comment, but that's not going to stop me. She knows about my account. Therefore, to avoid suspicion, I'll make alt accounts. I've set it up so these comments will continue to come in. Just you watch, Ginny D. I'll make alt accounts with my left hand and confess my love with my right. I'll take a potato chip and eat it!
Hey, wait. Guys, this isn't a potato chip. What the heck? We didn't have it in the budget.
Foiled again.
Also, she just blocked your alt account too, dude.
What? It sucks that people, especially women, need to deal with this on the internet. I know Alana Pierce had a crazy story, Jane Animations has crazy stories, Ginny D, as we just saw. I mean, God, I have my fair share of messages like this one. And if a gangly gremlin like me gets these messages, then nobody is safe, man. Basically what I'm trying to say is, if you think you got a shot with your favorite YouTuber, you don't. You just don't. Go outside. You really need the sun. It may be a little long, but just bear with me. So me and Rick go back a long way. He was actually the first person to ever introduce me to Dungeons & Dragons, and overall, he is a pretty good dungeon master. He's insanely creative. His world building and combats are really interesting and unique. I'd say when it comes to D&D, he really is an expert, especially when creating or finding amazing homebrew stuff. The same with NPCs he introduces. However, unfortunately, Rick has a little problem with control, and that's what I think is messing up our game. Rick tends to build his own powerful characters. A lot of them are on the 20th level, and then proceeds to either steal player spotlight or not let something happen at all. The first situation like that occurred during the end of our first campaign. Rick organized it so that every player had their own season, where the whole party was participating in quests expanding on one player's character lore at a time. It was my character's turn, Apollo. For context, Apollo was a changeling bard who got adopted by a man who ran a circus. After the death of his adopted father's daughter, the dad became abusive. He became more aggressive and started exploiting Apollo's shape-shifting abilities for entertainment in the circus. I'm not going to expand more on this backstory and how it went, because it's a long story. The point is, the final boss of my character's season was my dad, but he's even more powerful with magic stuff after all these years that they've been apart. The session was full of interesting puzzles and hints. As I said, Rick was absolutely, and still is, absolutely great when it comes to ideas. And then, at the end of the session, the final boss fight begins. My bard was already quite powerful at this point. With my spells and combined attacks with companions, he could do a lot of damage. Apollo was also a very vengeful person, which only served to fuel his need to be the one to finish his abusive father off. Sadly, I wasn't given much opportunity to do that. I did deal some damage, as I said before, but when I was really close to killing my father, the almighty powerful NPC arrived. He defeated him, but made it so I could talk to my father.
My name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die.
Yes! Die! At last, I, Tors of Arathor, have slain my great enemy. Your great enemy? He killed my father! I was already preparing him to die. You did not need to do that. Who even are you? Oh, well, it's quite a long story. Back in the kingdom of Arathor, a man by the name of Anduin saved me from... Never mind, I don't care. Oh my god. You just completely ruined this for me. Ruined? If anything, I saved you. Revenge is a dark and dreary path. I mean, I know I took my revenge, but if you took your revenge, that would be very...
I was a little pissed, because being the one to kill him was a thing Apollo wanted to do for a really long time, and then Rick wanted to convince him to forgive the man. My dying father was made to be more of a gray character, and it was clear Rick wanted for Apollo to make up with him. Looking at my background, the fact that Apollo was literally exploited for money and entertainment as a child, that did not make sense at all. But given it was my first ever campaign, I was sad and angry, but I just brushed it off. I think worse things happened in this next campaign. Of course, there was an instance of his DMPC suddenly appearing to finish off our enemies, even though the whole party was doing great as is. But the thing that made me actually lose interest in that campaign were a different caliber entirely. So, my character, from the beginning, was an asexual artificer, who also has a sister. They were both asexual, and it was very important to me that it had to stay this way. Seth, my character, was the type of person to hate physical touch, even be repulsed by it. So I thought it would be interesting for his sister to be the complete opposite of that, yet still also ace. I described her as a person who doesn't care about physical touch, and sometimes uses her looks as a means to achieve something, but she also doesn't like boning or anything close to that, also because of the culture they both grew up in. So I put as a note for this character NPC to not do that stuff ever. I really like the concept of these two ace people who have different views of sex, and that's why I made her and my character like that. Rick was the dungeon master and was thus the one to play her, because she was introduced as an NPC, and he also approved. He approved of everything I said about her. A month passes, and I am informed by Rick, the asexual NPC I wrote specifically to not have any intimate encounters, made out, and maybe even more with somebody while I was absent. His excuse was, "I'm sorry, the persuasion rolls were just too good." I was furious. I get really attached to the characters I make. Her concept was so cool and I really liked her. I only agreed for Rick to roleplay as her simply because I didn't think I could handle two characters at once. And then he just threw away a big chunk of her personality because the roles were just too good. There were so many things he could have done instead of making her make out with somebody. I know it was technically consensual from the character's perspective, but I feel like she was violated in some way. The worst thing about it was I think the character Seth's sister made out with was my boyfriend's character, who, one, Seth had a little crush on, and two, well, he was my boyfriend's character. I kind of felt betrayed. Not sure if it was him, though. I don't know if it was his fault. After that, I really lost interest in the campaign and Seth's sister as a character. But hey, it doesn't even end there. Recently, I had a one-shot playing as Seth because I was absent on some previous sessions for school stuff. It started out great. I got to go on a side quest with two NPCs I met before, one of them being an autistic character that Seth got to really like. He's autistic too, and they both have the same relationship with killing and crime, which is quite unique for the world that Rick created. The first battle begins. Seth quietly climbed a tree and proceeded to attack from a distance. I had a jar of whiskey or some other alcohol and darts filled with magic fire. I wanted to pour the whiskey onto this minotaur that we were fighting, as it was under the tree I had just climbed. Because I had already used my action, I had to wait another turn to light up the alcohol on the creature with my dart. Rick realized what I wanted to do, yet made the NPC that was fighting the Minotaur start making out with him? Why? Because that NPC loves alcohol and wanted to lick all of it from the Minotaur. That's why he charmed it and started licking off dripping whiskey from the creature. Sam Riegel called. He wants his fetish back.
Whole table just turned into the horny and aroused meme.
Yeah.
Both myself and my character are just stunned by what happened. Seth is an artificer alchemist. In every combat, I need to rely on strategy and unique ideas because without them, my alchemist just doesn't deal a lot of damage. And instead of letting me do something for once, being cool with things I make during combat, I don't have a lot of opportunity to do that. I play a fighter and an insanely buff cleric most of the time. Instead, the guy just stole my spotlight. I remind you that the character Seth is really repulsed by making out and stuff like that. So yeah, I spent the rest of the combat, which wasn't long, just puking, throwing acid splash on the enemies.
Yeah. dude, I got a whiff.
When I told Rick after combat that it was rather a crappy thing for him to do, he just responded with, "That's what the character would do." Honestly, all of that just makes me not want to play in that campaign anymore. I love Seth. He's my first ever character with such a unique personality and abilities. In studying chemistry myself and playing while using my own knowledge, it's been fun, but the way Rick just ruins NPCs I give him or my opportunities to shine, it just really bothers me. I really don't know what to do. The Seth sister incident happened like half a year ago, and I'm mad at myself for not addressing it at the time. The things I described happened more or less to other players too, and Rick knows he has a problem with stealing the show from players. I think he just doesn't want to change. Should I address all of that and talk to him even if it's been a long time since all it happened? And if I should, how? Thanks for hearing me out. I love your videos, Crispy, and just wanted to add that you have a great voice. It's nice to listen to while drawing. Thank you. My voice was actually an insecurity for a long time, so it's kind of weird hearing people say that. Okay, so obviously the ace conversion thing is not great. No matter what role you do on persuasion, you can't do that to a player character, and you can't do that to an NPC either. It's just not cool. This is actually something that is interesting though, something we don't talk about a lot. I love it when players work with DMs to make NPCs, and those NPCs become very precious to the players for good reason. They helped in their creation. Part of the reason why a DM would do that with a player is to make something the player cares about. Ginny D made a great video on this. But you need to respect that care. You need to respect what the player has in mind for the character, both the player character and the NPCs in their backstory. Because when you transform them like that, especially in this manner, it does not come off well at all. Combine that with the DM's habit of spotlight hogging, which is not good in a player character and even worse in a dungeon master, and you have a whole cacophony of issues. I understand this DM has their benefits. All DMs do, even the worst ones, but this is something that is worth interrogating. Is it worth it to play with this guy? It will be awkward bringing these problems up, but unless you want to just leave the campaign, which would also be a valid solution, you need to talk about this. You either leave or you talk. You can't just stay silent. All right, and that's a wrap. If you guys enjoyed, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more of our content, then you can check out our Tabletop Tavern Tips series, where we cover tips for both DMs and players, old and new. While you're there in the cards, subscribe to Crispy's Tavern to get more of our content as it comes out. And finally, if you want to leave your own stories or thoughts, go down in the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment. You can't unace to let me know you made it to the end of the video. Hey, by the way, if you have your own stories, then send them directly to us. There's an email down in the description down below. Send your stories our way for a chance to be featured in one of these videos. But hey, even if you don't have any stories, and like, comment, subscribe, I will see you all next time. Farewell.
Ow, that actually hurt. Oh, my back. You're not supposed to hold a sword like this, but it fits in the frame. Okay, just leave me alone.